As we go through this series on sex, I know one of the questions that comes up is, how far is too far? I know it's a question that I asked when I was a teenager. Like, how much can I get away with sexually and still be considered okay? And today we're going to look at, is that really the right question that we should be asking? And is there a different question that we should be asking? There's a reality in life that when we want something really badly, we'll go pretty far to get it. I remember when I was in elementary school, I had a friend who was in Boy Scouts who had these really cool fold-up scissors. They like pulled apart and then they cut, and then you could fold them back up and put them in a little pouch. Well, I wasn't cool enough to be in Boy Scouts, but my friend was, and so I really wanted those little scissors, and so I just took them. I mean, I knew stealing was wrong, but I really wanted the scissors. When my parents saw me with them a few days later and they asked me where I got them, I just said, oh, I just found them somewhere. Well, they put two and two together when my friend's mom was talking about how he had lost these really important scissors for Boy Scouts. And I knew the line. I knew stealing was wrong. He was a friend of mine. I knew I shouldn't have taken them, but I did it anyway. And a lot of times in life, the lines that we draw become really blurry when we want something bad enough. And so when it comes to sex and sexual activity, we can want that satisfaction of sex pretty badly, that we'll be willing to blur lines that maybe we've drawn in our lives because we just want it bad enough. We want to experience pleasure, we want to experience connection. And so when we want that bad enough, we just make bad choices. Sometimes our want is more powerful than our should. We know we shouldn't do something, but we want something so much that we're willing to break the thing that we know we shouldn't do. A game a lot of us play when we were growing up was step on a crack, break your mother's back. Well, who wants to really injure their mom that badly? You'd have to be a pretty hateful person to want to break your mother's back. And so we step over those lines, we try to avoid them, because we know using our imagination that if we stepped on this crack that somehow our mom would fall down instantly in pain and we would have broken her back, and she would have known that it was you that stepped on the crack. So when we are out on the playground, we step over the cracks. We try to get really close to the line, but never actually step on the line. We avoid the cracks because it's fun, but also because of that pretend consequence that it might break our mother's back. And usually in our lives, we try to avoid bad consequences, especially ones that are huge, that we know will affect us for a long period of time. But a lot of times we think the consequences won't happen to us, that those consequences happen to other people, that somehow we can outsmart the situation, or that we'll get lucky, or that our situation's different than normal. And so we'll do things that we know normally give us really bad consequences. We do this with sexual activity too. We think the consequences won't happen to us. I mean, not very many people go out thinking that they're going to end up as a teenage parent, but some do. We always think our situation is different. And so a lot of times what we do with sex is we think, well, how far can I go up to that line before I start experiencing really bad consequences? And it's something we all do in our lives. We think, well, how far can I push the line before I get hurt? So why do we push the lines in our lives? I think there's three things. I think the first is we want as much of the thing that we can get as long as we don't cross that line. And so sometimes we make the lines really fuzzy in our lives, thinking, well, if I don't do this, I'm still okay, or if I do this, that's okay. And sometimes those lines can be just a little bit silly.
Hey.
Oh, hey.
Have you been waiting all?
No, just hanging out.
What are you looking at?
Nothing.
Are you Snapchatting?
No. I was just looking at pictures.
Yeah? Of what?
Dessert. But it's not like I'm eating it.
Okay, well. It's just kind of weird that you would like want to hang out here because you're trying to not do dessert. And there's like a ton of dessert here.
But it's not like I'm eating it.
Okay. Good.
Oh, that's my order.
Not yet.
What is that?
My lunch.
That's not lunch, that's dessert.
Well, no, I'm not having dessert. This is my lunch.
No, it's it's still dessert. Like you wouldn't, this is not lunch, this is dessert. You wouldn't have like a carrot or something after lunch, you know?
Yeah, I'm not eating carrots later.
No, but like, okay, well, this is dessert. Why did you decide to give up dessert in the first place?
Because it's not good for me, as much as I love it.
How does this help you?
Well, this is my lunch. Duh. It's not dessert. Because it's my lunch.
Okay.
Ooh, Tristan Snapchat. He wants me to send him a picture of my dessert.
Don't do that. You're just playing into having more dessert.
But I feel so good about myself. Now that I'm not eating dessert, I just feel like this is one of the best choices I have ever made.
The second reason I think we push the lines in our lives is that we want to feel self-righteous. Like, at least I'm not doing that. Like, at least I'm not crossing that line. At least I'm not like that person. And so when we start comparing ourselves either to the line or to other people who've crossed that line, we feel really good about ourselves. Like, oh, I'm doing such a good job in my life. I'm doing such a good job. God should be so happy with who I am and how I'm living my life. Again, we want as much as we can get without getting hurt, without crossing lines. And we want to make sure that we are the good people and we're not the bad people. And the third reason is honestly, a lot of times when it comes to following God, we just want to do the bare minimum. I know I do this in my life. There's times where it's like, oh, I'll give God, a minute of my time and I'll read the Bible. That's about all I can spare. But he should be pretty happy that I spent any time with him. And that's a lot of what we do. We think, well, what's the bare minimum where I can still be a Christ follower, but still enjoy as much of my life as I want? Thinking that that means enjoying life is whatever we want to do. But God created us for something amazing. He created us with a purpose. And a lot of times we disregard that purpose and we choose what we think is important in life. We don't look at what God really wants from us, we want what we want from us. When we think about our lives, it really just comes down to this. It's a simple question. Is what I'm doing in my life glorifying God? Are the decisions that I'm making bringing God glory? Or are they bringing me glory? And we start talking about sex and how far is too far. Maybe the question we should really just be asking is, does this decision bring God glory? Does sending a sketchy picture of myself to somebody bring God glory? Does hooking up with someone at a party bring God glory? You see, a lot of the decisions that we make are about bringing ourselves glory. And God created us for something more than that. God created us for something bigger, to bring Him glory. The creator of the universe, the creator of all things, the one who loves you and I so incredibly much. Are we bringing Him glory? When we're asking ourselves that question, the issue of lines all of a sudden isn't that important. Because the focus isn't on us, the focus is on God. It's not how can I please the person I'm dating, or how can I experience pleasure, or how can I feel connected to somebody. Ultimately, is my connection with another person, does that bring God glory? Is that somehow pleasing to God? When Jesus died on the cross and rose again, He offered freedom for us, freedom from the consequences of our sin. That doesn't mean the consequences here on earth, but it means the consequences eternally. That we get the opportunity to spend eternity with Him, that we don't get punished, we don't get what we deserve for the things that we've done, but we get to enjoy life forever with Jesus. But a lot of times we abuse that freedom knowing that, well, God will forgive me. In 1 Corinthians 6, Paul talks about this idea of, well, if I'm free, can't I just do anything? In verse 12, he says, "You say I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. And even though I'm allowed to do anything, I must not become a slave to anything. But you can't say that our bodies were made for sexual immorality. They were made for the Lord, and the Lord cares about our bodies. Don't you realize that your bodies are actually parts of Christ? Run from sexual sin. No other sin clearly affects the body as this one does. For sexual immorality is a sin against your own body. Don't you realize that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who lives in you and was given to you by God? You do not belong to yourself, for God bought you with a high price, so you must honor God with your body." We're making decisions about what we're going to do sexually, and we think, well, if I just do this, that's okay, as long as it's not sex. We're missing the point. We're missing what God has actually created us for. God created sex to be between a husband and a wife, where they are actually joined together as one functioning unit. And when we give ourselves to somebody else sexually, we're giving them a part of ourselves that God created us for just one other person. Ultimately, decisions that we make about sexual activity say a lot about how we view God. If we're going to say, God, I want to honor you with everything, and that includes my body, then we're going to look at sex very differently. If you're saying to God, God, I want what I want, and I'm going to do it my way, then you look at God as very small, that He doesn't really know you or what's best for you. So as you think about and make decisions about sex and sexual activity, I encourage you, think about the question of, is what I'm going to do honoring to God? Is it going to bring Him glory? Because all the issues of, well, how far is too far? What can I do and still be okay? They're kind of irrelevant. Those are questions that we've created just to feel good about ourselves so that we can do whatever we want to do and feel okay about it. God's not trying to hurt you. He's not trying to keep something amazing from you. God created sex and sexual activity for you to experience with just one person, that you would be unified together with your husband or your wife, and that you would experience what God created exactly as He intended it to be. We all make choices about lots of different things, just like I chose to steal because I wanted what I wanted. God created us for something amazing, and we have to be able to trust Him that He has our best interests in mind. And when we want to follow Him with everything, that means all of our decisions. It's saying every day, God, I know I'm going to want a lot of things today that aren't good for me. Help me to trust You and have strength to follow through with what You created me to be.